Shockwaves went down the spine of the farmers' movement when Nihangs brutally killed a Dalit Sikh labor at the Singhu border protest site. The Samyukt Kisan Morcha immediately disassociated itself and the movement from the Dastardly Act. But the ripples can be felt, as all are shocked at the violence that the farmer leaders feel will now be used to defame the movement. However, as the Morcha said, the farmers have been facing intense challenges since the movement began. And they have withstood this for 11 months, getting on to a year, making this the longest sustained peasant movement in India. It is different from earlier such agitations in North India, as the patriarchal barrier seems to have been finally penetrated by the women folk. And it has bridged the gap between the rich and poor peasantry, merging farmers into one united whole. A unity that has been able to withstand such challenges with firmness and dedication. So we have with us today Professor Ranjit Singh Ghuman. He is the professor of eminence at Punjab School of Economics, Guru Nanak Dev University. He is a well-known rural economist and an economist. He's been writing at length. He's co-authored a book. He's one of the experts, and I think he should have been even more recognized nationally, though he is a figure of repute in this belt of Punjab and Haryana, and very well known and in Delhi, for all that he has contributed to our understanding of the rural economy. Welcome to Off Limits, sir.
Thank you.
We are so happy to have you.
Thank you.
Now, I just want to focus a little bit on the farmer stir, because we need a certain, kind of analysis of what's happening. Now, in your life, you have obviously, having specialized in the areas that you have, seen the peasantry of India closely. But have you ever seen it on the roads with such determination and for such a long time?
In fact, if we go back a century ago, the year was 1907.
Okay.
The agitation was launched by none else but real uncle of Shahid Bhagat Singh by the name Ajit Singh. And then one poet, I forgot the name, wrote, Pagdi Sambhal Jatta, Pagdi Sambhal Hoye. Okay, you save your turban. And turban means your
honor.
Honor.
G.
You save your honor.
Yes.
And in 1930s, pre-independence, 34, 35, then there were, at that time, there were in 1907, when this agitation was launched, there were 3 laws passed by the British, and they related to the farming and farmers, farming and agriculture. The agitation went long, and the then powers that be, the foreign powers, they had to take back. Then comes Choturam, Sir Choturam. In 1930s, he manages to pass some laws in favor of the farmers. That is long history. I'm not going into that. But somewhere around that, in 1925 to be precise, M.L. Darling wrote, he was an ICS officer at that time and deputy commissioner in Ambala, Firozpur, and in many other things. He wrote his field experiences on farmers' destiny of the day. And he writes that book. That book is worth reading. Even now it's relevant. That is the Punjab Peasantry in Debt and Prosperity. Punjab Peasantry. Punjab was a very big state at that time, you know.
Yes.
Maybe comparable to present UP.
Yeah.
So at that time, he wrote, debt and prosperity are going side by side. But at that time, there were no suicides by the farmers. But after almost a century, the farmers have started committing suicides. In Punjab, a small state now, about 20,000 farmers and agricultural laborers have committed suicide during the last 20 years. And if we have a look at the data of the whole country, then 4.5 lakh farmers have committed suicide in their. It means something serious has gone wrong with the agriculture sector. And two figures, Seemaji, are very, very important in that. And two figures are that around 1970 or 71, 50% of the GDP was coming from agriculture.
Yes, I was going to ask.
And now, and about 62% of the workforce or population was dependent on agriculture. Now, for the last 5 years, it has stagnated and hovering, oscillating around 14-15%. And the population dependence is 60%, workforce is 45%. So you can well imagine 45% workforce, 60% population is sharing only 14% of the nation's GDP. So this speaks volume that relatively speaking,
Yes,
the farming sector has been ignored, and all that has grew. It has grown at the cost of the farming sector. So something serious has gone, and this agitation, the 3 laws which have been passed clandestinely, I would say, during the period when COVID was going on, when nation was locked down, what was the urgency to bring these laws in the form through ordinance route? It means, it speaks that the intentions of the government of the day were not clear, and that their claim, only on one point I discard their claim, and that is that had it been in the farmers' interest, what was the need to bring clandestinely during a period when the nation was fighting a natural calamity?
so in the way that you've just narrated, then these 3 laws, while bad in themselves, as you're saying, they were also the last nail in a way on the coffin of all the problems that the farmers and our rural economy has been facing, right?
Yeah, in fact, I would call it a proverbial last straw on the camel's back, or last nail, as you say. Now the farming community is feeling that now it's do or die, because they have been pushed to the wall. Now what will happen after that? Either the wall will collapse back, or you will react back. And unfortunately, the farmers who are fighting for their survival and future generations, who are the backbone of Indian economy even today, they are not being treated as citizens of the country. The Prime Minister has not spoken a word about 2 weeks back, when Karnal incidents takes place, and they're followed by this
Lakhimpur
Kheri incidents. 3 incidences are very important. Prime Minister's speech that these laws are in the interest of the farmers. Second, CM of a state, Haryana, says that you should do tit for tat. Have an army of lieutenants in each district, 500 to 7. The video was viral. Everybody knows it.
Yes.
And then comes the central state home minister's speech. All this is in a line. And my question to the government is that had it been in favor of the farmers, are farmers really fool that they are launching a peaceful agitation for more than a year, and for the last 10 months, they are sitting on the Delhi border and they are not being treated as citizens of India.
Right.
What prevents the government to invite them for talk? Since last January, there is no dialogue. Yes.
Right. So if when it started, it was sort of started from Punjab, went into Haryana. Haryana got more and more involved, went into Western UP, particularly after the Kite's tears, and they had a leader out of their own soil, as it were. And now it's in Western UP, and this is the belt where it is strong and where it is sustained and where you can feel the presence of the farmers' movement in a big way. there have been reactions in Maharashtra and in southern states. Tamil Nadu farmers have come and others in Karnataka also. But what is the reason why this intensity of the stir is not moving out of North India into the south at the same level?
MSP is the answer to this. CACP, Commission for Agricultural Cost and Prices, it recommends MSP for 23 crops, and MSP is available only to 2-3 crops, and wheat and paddy. And wheat and paddy is being grown in Western UP, in Haryana and Punjab has been the stark success story of Green Revolution. And this Green Revolution, particularly the paddy, was promoted by MSP, CACP, FCI assured market clearance, and R&D in wheat and paddy. And now when the country is in self-reliant, and certain other states are being self-reliant or producing some marginal surplus, the central government is saying, in fact, these laws are a two-pronged strategy to push farmers out of agriculture, to push farmers of Punjab, Haryana, Western UP out of wheat and paddy crop rotation. I suggest, as an economist, I would suggest to the government that let saner sense prevails on the government, and let the way these crops were promoted in 60s, 70s, 80s, the same policy mix should be brought if the nation really feels that we have enough of wheat, we have enough of paddy, which is a wrong perception. If you give food security, as per Food Security Act, to 67% of the population, then you will feel there is hardly any. And UNO studies are there that many countries are going to face food insecurity in the years to come. So I would say that why government is pushing out farmers out of agriculture by arm twisting? Why government is pushing out farmers by out of wheat and paddy rotation by arm twisting? Why? Farmers have not developed this arm business.
Yeah. So I also want you to move a little bit, because of your own studies and your writings, a little bit into the character of our peasantry. You know, because people are still surprised at the kind of attack that they have withstood, this physical attack they are withstanding, the slurs on the character, the lies about them, and yet they have remained very united and very together. The journalists, some of us did see the latter part of Charan Singh, we call them the Kulak movement, because it was a certain limited to a certain area and for certain interests. But and it had that kind of patriarchal aggression. But now you find that patriarchy has extended or has withdrawn to accommodate women. The importance of women in the movement has been highlighted by everyone. Plus, we are seeing this determination, we are seeing this unity, we are seeing this ability to withstand a certain kind of attack and assault, which other movements have not been able to in India in the recent years.
In fact, this movement, the most credible characteristics of this movement is that farmers have united on a single issue, and they are backed by common citizens, by laborers, by trade unions, because already they had attacked labor by bringing in four codes of labor, anti-labor, pro-capital, and they couldn't do anything. Now unemployment is at the height of the 6, 7, 8%, even 14% in the youth segment. Everybody is feeling helpless. But now when the farmers raised this, as you said rightly, a peaceful, united agitation, the government is in a fix, and government is characterizing them anti-national, Khalistanis, Naxalites, and whatnot. And I think if farmer is not national, if farmer is not patriotic, nobody in this country is patriotic, I would say. Only farmers are at the front row, because it is from farmers, laborers, lower classes, 86% of your farmers are small and marginal farmers. The lower positions in the constabulary, in the defense, in the army, paramilitary forces, it comes from this section. This section is in fact the most patriotic section. And I appreciate that in spite of so many provocations, the farmers have not resorted to some, they have not compromised with their peace leaders or trying to keep their peace even after Lakhimpur Kheri, which is condemnable by any stretch of imagination, which cannot be pardoned, and history will not pardon it. And you see, then in this context, I would say that the Indian history, particularly during the last 7 years of this BJP rule, have seen any such movement which could stem the bulldozer of this government. You see, minorities are being marginalized. There are other laws which have been passed, and everything is being done to clear the way for capital. And you see, even the now privatization, monetization of the government assets, public money is being monetized to favor some favored people. So what is this? It means...
Yeah, I'm just taking you back a little bit, Professor. Two characteristics of this movement seem really fascinating to some of us who have tried to cover it. One is the involvement and the connect between now the landless or the small marginalized farmer with the big farmer, which is very interesting. And I don't know if it's the first in this at this level. I would like you to tell us. And the second, like we said earlier, the emergence of women as a primary support system and as in the front lines. That seems to be definitely a new element to a farmer's
In fact, I would take the last first.
Okay.
The participation of women in such a large number, ignoring their household, ignoring their children, and even at the back end, taking care of the agricultural activities, they have in fact the vanguard of sustaining this course. But I would suggest that the kind of prominence the women are being given or getting now, they should continue to get in future as well when this agitation is not there, because women constitute half of the population. And if you empower them, make them more participated in the development process, the country will grow.
Right.
So that's recognized. Second, which you called small farmer and margin, large farmer. I think it's a misnomer.
Okay.
Large, where are the large farmers? Punjab, it's just say 5-6% are the large farmers. In other states, I have toured every state of India. I have been visiting professors at certain universities in the south also. And it's somewhere 90%, 95% are small farmers. The kind of characterization that they are the rich farmers agitating for against these laws, it's again a myth. Another myth is that farmers are demanding MSP as a legal right. What prevents the government to give that? I tell you, the government says that if they give, they will need 17 lakh crores of rupees. It's false. It's not true. Already government is spending somewhere between 2.5 and 3 lakh crore, and 1.5 lakh crore will be here. Farmers are not demanding that every grain should be purchased by government. Let private companies purchase, but there must be some reference point. If MSP is not there, the reference point is not there. So farmers are demanding that. So second thing, why the government is not doing? It's not the 17 lakh crore argument. It is because if it becomes legal, the private companies not purchasing at the MSP, below, if they purchase MSP, they will be in trouble, and government doesn't want them to be in trouble. And third myth is that only the capital is the wealth creation. Capital is the value addition. It's wrong. Economic theories, right from Marx to Adam Smith, New Classical, even now, the value is being created by humans, labor, farmers, workers, everywhere. It's being created. And why you are celebrating only the few entrepreneurs, industrialists?
So that's what, when you're talking of the entrepreneurs, the big business, etc., the alarm bells for this were ringing quite a while ago. Maybe they've speeded up in the last few years, but you did sense this corporate control, the shift away from the villages to the urban dwellings. When did you, personally, I'm asking you now as an economist, actually sense that there was a major shift in policy where the big corporate houses were now going to determine what was happening in India's heartland, rural heartland?
In fact, the genesis goes back to early 1980s or mid 1980s.
Okay.
Then in 1991, there is a complete shift of policy. That is privatization, globalization, and liberalization, 3 planks of the new economic policy. But at that time, there were side by side, there were certain social safety nets. Their Manrega comes in that period, then Land Acquisition Act comes, and RTI comes, so many things come, right to education comes. And if you go back to the history of other countries, when they were in our stage, they had alternate, attractive employment opportunities. Now, where are the opportunities? When already you have so much unemployment, means you will compel the farmers and laborers who will be pushed out of agriculture in the years to come. They will be compelled either to suicide or to work menial jobs at a very, very subsistence ways. So this kind of, I think, then 1991, okay, the breaking point was departure of the policy was 1991. Then during the last 6-7 years, this government has added speed and unidirectional speed. It's anti-labor, anti-farmer, pro-capital. I think this will not take the country to the expected heights or the commanding heights or the world power or the Vishwa Guru. This will not take the country to that height. I think in fact, participation of all in the development process is very, very important. And everybody must understand that poverty anywhere or injustice anywhere is threat to peace and prosperity everywhere. So if such things are not addressed, if the people feel alienated, if the people feel that they are not getting justice at the hands of the power, even across all the organs of state, then what will people do?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's a biggest challenge.
So that brings me actually to my last question in this conversation, which is what happens now? The government is saying it's not going to back off. The stir is not weakened, it is strengthened and expanded. So what do you see happening? And as it continues, usually governments have staying power unless there are, of course, elections, and people find it very, very difficult because you're already stretching every little resource you have to continue a struggle which you believe in. How long?
I think the government should not have a hard stand. The government must enter into dialogue, and if at all there is some gray space. Now, at the moment, there are two schemes. One, government is saying we will not repeal. Farmers are saying we will not go back until they are repealed. Somewhere there must be some gray area, and I sense that if some positive measures are taken on this front with open mind on both sides, then but not the kind of way which the committee constituted by the Supreme Court. all the four persons were known supporter and architect of those laws. So if at all the government is to formulate to some committee, it should be acceptable to the farmers as well. One way can be that let it be postponed or put on hold for 2-3 years. And I would suggest that committee should first study the implications of these laws on the farm sector as a whole, on the economy as a whole, and also the kind of agrarian crisis and farmers' distress in the country. It's not only the laws. Laws will certainly add to the crisis and distress. But even before that, agrarian crisis was there, is there, and it will continue to be. And second thing I would suggest is that that committee, which is acceptable to government as well as to the farmers, they should give their recommendations not to the central government, but to the state assemblies. Each state assembly must debate on the recommendations of that committee. And what comes out of that, what consensus is built on those recommendations by all the states, it should be debated at a national level. It will save the national government as well, the state government's economy, the federal structure of the country, as well as the argument that agriculture is a state subject. So it will strengthen the social fabric, political fabric, economic fabric of the country, and country will move forward. But this kind of attitude that you do not treat the farmers as citizens, it is protest, though is prolonging, but yet it is getting support from every state of the country, from all sections. How long you will continue? The farmers are not agitating for fun. They are compelled to do it, and the government responsibility is much higher than the farmers. And I would suggest that if some proposal comes from the government, farmers should discuss it openly, and something must come out of that. Never such agitations, though it has become a great instrument of social change, even political awareness, even social economic awareness, and it has mitigated the difference community difference and all that. But I think this is not in the larger interest of the country. So since government is representing the country, government is responsible. There is unwritten contract between the people and the government. When they elect their representatives, government should honor that, honor the verdict, and they should come forward with open mind without saying, if you say something is in my favor, I say it's not in my favor. So how can you convince? I can't convince you, because this is very funny that the kind of laws which the farmers are accepting, why are you imposing on them? So there must be some way out at the earliest possible, so that farmers could return to their fields. Agitation is not the domain of the farmers, but they are compelled by the government to come forward and protest and launch such. They should go to field, they should create wealth and all that. And
thank you so much. This was very informative. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Simon.
Well, we end yet another discussion on the farmers' issue with the million-dollar question: when is it going to end? Is it going to end? Is the government going to concede and repeal the 3 controversial farm laws? The stir has become stronger. It has expanded. It has become more intense. And despite 10, 11 months on the roads, the farmers' unity has not fractured. They are still together. They are determined that they will get their rights, because, as they have said, and as Professor Ghumman said in the interview earlier to us today, that they are aware that if they give in now, they will lose a lot more than they have lost in the past decades, when corporatization and globalization and the reforms, as it were, has taken away from rural economy and added to the wealth of those living in the big cities. So let's see where this goes. We will keep a watch on it, and we'll keep coming back to you with more and more on the issue. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.